So, thank you for the question and thanks for having me. The Atlantic Council is a foreign policy think tank which is non-partisan in the US, so both for Democrats and Republicans. And when it comes to Europe, we were founded in 1961. So we have been working for a long time to forge the transatlantic community. We believe in American leadership together with partners and allies. And we also believe that when the US and Europe work together to solve global problems, we are better off in the world, so to say. So that is our goal. Even though it's difficult sometimes, we try to forge an agenda that strives in that direction. Well, that's a very interesting question, and I think that's what we're seeing today, where this relationship is in big transformation, you can say, because the United States firmly believes, the Trump administration in a more brutal way, I think, than previous administrations, but the US has been sending this message to Europe for a long time, that Europe, you're prosperous, you're solid democracies, you need to take responsibility for your continent and for the security of your continent. We cannot be the prime guarantor for peace in Europe forever and ever and ever. And that is why European allies now have agreed upon a rather ambitious increase of defense spending, you can say. I know Spain had some issues with this, the 5% pledge that was agreed upon at the NATO summit in The Hague this summer. But it is necessary in order to build this defense capacity for Europe to take this responsibility and be less dependent on the United States, to enter, if we talk about the relationship, more into a partnership with the United States, where the United States must not inevitably lead in every single issue that happens to us, but the Europeans can take responsibility and then ask the United States, are you willing to be a part of this? And they would say yes or no, and you have a bit of a revert kind of way of looking at it and dealing with issues. Well, there is three convergent things, I think, that are happening. The main threat to European security stems from Russia. Now, Russia, for some, are seen as a direct military threat in Ukraine, where they are in their fourth year now of a full-scale invasion and war. And that is true, of course, for the Ukrainians. They are struggling, fighting, but Russia is also a bigger threat to the whole continent of Europe, and that connection is also, and the magnitude of the Russian threat is important for everyone to grasp, even though you are geographically far away from Russia. I know for myself, I have a place in southern Spain. From my area, we can watch the Atlas Mountains of Morocco. And of course, Russia feels very, very far away. That's natural. When I am in Stockholm, by the Baltic Sea, where I live, Russia is not that far away. It's just, a 2-hour flight over to St. Petersburg, but or even less, actually. So, but the threat that Russia poses to Europe is perhaps important to grasp for everyone, because it is about fragmenting what we have. The strong institutions that we have built, the European Union and NATO, if that can be split and instead we have a system which Russia would prefer, where Europe is divided into spheres of interests, like we had long before in the 19th, early 20th century, where we also had a lot of wars and fighting in Europe, because this is not a good system, not a good order. It doesn't build prosperity for the future. But that's what Russia wants, because it serves their interests. It makes Russia feel more secure. So the war that Russia is fighting against Europe is not it's not a traditional war, it is a hybrid war that we are seeing here. And in that sense, basically all countries in Europe are more or less affected. You can be directly targeted by their cyber attacks or the sabotage or drone incursions, migrants, the weaponization of migrants that are pushed along a border, or infrastructure sabotage or infiltration or disinformation in connection to elections, for instance. There are a range of various instruments that Russia uses, but since it targets also our common European institutions, everyone is targeted. So there is no escape, basically, even though Russia's sphere of interest would be Eastern Europe. You can't say, well, it's Eastern Europe, so it doesn't affect us. Everyone will be affected in this. And as long as Russia is driving this agenda where they're fighting militarily in Ukraine, but they have a much broader hybrid warfare ongoing against Europe year after year after year, we have to step up and realize that our societies are too vulnerable in peacetime. And we need to build resilience. I think that's my core message here, apart from the strong defense that we are aiming for. Yes, so when it comes to building military capability for European allies, there is a process ongoing in NATO. So it started in 2022 with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. NATO allies understood and had that discussion that, okay, what we have prepared for does not resemble this. We had not envisioned that Russia would launch a full-scale military invasion against a neighboring state. We thought that maybe or possibly Russia would do a land incursion or a land grab like they had done on Crimea or in eastern Ukraine, but a full-scale military invasion, that was very, very scary. And that caused NATO to scrutinize all its military plans, which they have done. So we are now prepared to meet an aggression from Russia on a much, much larger scale. And so the plans are there, they call the family of plans, defense plan, operational plans. And then NATO followed up and said, okay, so what do we need in order to be able to implement those plans if needed? And those capabilities are also identified, and each ally has received capability targets in order to meet those ambitions. And that's where we have actually coming back to the Hague summit and the 5% pledge. So the 5% pledge on defense by 2035, it's divided in two parts. So one is 3.5% of GDP on military spending. And that's actually the estimate that NATO could see. We need to have a level of this in average in order to meet those capability targets, in order to be able to conduct those plans that we have agreed upon, that we need, that we will exercise, that we will dispose ammunition for, and where we also have forward land forces in those countries that border Russia. So there are 9 forward land forces with NATO troops brigade size that are also prepared to go in. So the 3.5% are directly connected to the planning of NATO, and that's how we will build our capabilities. No, I don't think they fully understand the magnitude. I think it varies a lot also within Europe, depending on where you are. If you're closer to Russia, if you have a history of Russian invasions or aggression, then it comes closer to mind, I think, to prepare the Nordics, the Baltics, Poland. I think there you have a mindset where we are more prepared for something like this, or more also aware of what's happening. We also very targeted in the hybrid sphere. But also in Sweden, when I walk the streets, I would meet people that say that, oh, you deal with awful things. And I say, well, we're all affected. It's not me. It's not because I work on security and defense that it's not, this is for all of us to deal with. It's all about our societies. But we need much more of a whole of society approach, I think, among the public. And it's a difficult thing because politicians, for once, they don't win votes talking about defense and security. You win the votes by talking about, healthcare or school or infrastructure or the police, law and order, whatever problems, everyday problems that people face in a country. Defense and security is much further away. You need to have long-term planning. It's difficult to win the votes, and then of course you don't want to worry the public if it's not necessary. You could also say, I meet that reaction sometimes. In Sweden, for instance, we produced one of our authorities produced a booklet with a title, "What to Do if the War Comes," and it was sent to all households in Sweden with written instructions on how to prepare, what you should have at home, where to go, and et cetera, right? When I traveled around Europe and I got so many questions on this, when do you think Russia is coming? Is Russia coming next year to Sweden? Or why do you do this? And we're like, no, we do this because we just want people to know, to be prepared. It doesn't mean that anything might happen. And actually it is a bit the reverse. You can say that being prepared is a way of preventing Russia from even thinking about coming, because it makes societies resilient. It makes us less vulnerable. It makes people aware that, okay, it might come a day when I have to defend my democratic institutions that I always complain about. Usually people complain about politicians, or you think, but what would be the alternative if you think about that? A dictatorship or fascism, it's much, much worse, right? So I think this resilient part, or having shelters, for instance. So even if you bomb and target civilians, they won't die, they will come back. They will go to the shelters, they will come back and keep on doing what they do in the society. So you cannot break the society. That's the important message. And if the adversary knows that, you can say it's part of deterrence. I think Spain is visible, and Spain has an important role. I know in Stockholm, for instance, by the Baltic Sea, we would have Spanish warships coming in as part of NATO's standing fleet. We would have Spanish jet fighters helping guard the Baltic airspace through the NATO police mission, which is done frequently. I know we have also missile defense in Latvia, Romania. So Spain is part of this, which is important, and we know that you have several capabilities. You have a strong defense industry as well, so you have a good base. But then, of course, when Spain was saying that, well, we can't really take on the 3.5% ambition for the defense pledge, it's too much. That was perhaps viewed with some surprise, that it was a signal that, if everyone does that, it's not solidarity towards everyone else. And also because of the process that we have had with the defense capability targets and so on. It is of course a rough estimate, 3.5% of GDP. It's very rough, right? So perhaps you could say we could do it cheaper, we could do it better. Technology changes, so in the end you might be able to fulfill your obligations with less money. Isn't that a good thing? Well, of course it is. But this was more about allies sending a coherent message of solidarity and ambition and realization. So in that sense, I think it was good in the end that the Hague Summit could unity agree on the 5% pledge. That was very well received. Well, I think Spain is an important country in the sense that Spain is a big country and you have a lot of assets. You also have a rather big army, industrial base, capabilities, naval, air, cyber, etc. So I think it would be much welcome to have Spain very much engaged. Now, I understand that Spain is not at the border of Russia, so it's this mental step of kind of motivating for the Spanish people. But I think you are members of the European Union. It's important that everyone has to understand that we have a common destiny in Europe. We are all tied together. So if we want our prosperity and peace, we need to understand that it's a European perspective we have in that. What happens in Germany or Sweden or Spain, Portugal, it affects us all, right? So we are interlinked. We saw that before World War II. We saw it when we gave Hitler concessions. We thought that he would be content with Sudetenland and Austria, but it didn't stop there. Everyone got dragged into a major war, and that's what happens when you have a country of Russia's character that wants to extend its power, wants to extend its territory, wants to have a position in the international system where it can decide and dictate to others what to do. And then it affects a whole region, not only the ones, those countries that are directly targeted as a single situation. It's very important, the southern flank as well. So, but we have seen so far a different kind of threat, stemming perhaps more from non-state actors, from failed states, from migration flows. But you also have increasing energy flows coming in from Africa to Europe, and terrorism, organized crime, things like that. So all of that is also, it's about stability, it's about securing the space, which is very important. And the Mediterranean is of course also important for Russia, so there is a connection there. Russia is not only about the Baltic Sea or the North Atlantic and the Kola Peninsula up in the Arctic. Russia has bases in the Mediterranean. Russia also at least wants to access the Black Sea, even though it can't. You have the sea routes, you have through the Suez Canal, you have a lot of very important flows going through. So I usually describe Russia's strategic playing field as an arc going from the Black Sea, the Mediterranean, and then up to the Baltic Sea, and then even further up to the very north of the Arctic. So from Russia's perspective, when they look at Europe, this is what they see. The whole, no one escapes, because they can project power from all of these positions. I think it's a fallacy to think that Russia is something very far away up in the northeast. Well, that has to really be a whole of society approach, and by that I mean that citizens need to be aware of what's going on. You have to have outreach, even starting in schools, as I see it. When it comes to disinformation, it's very important that young students, pupils are taught what are credible sources, how can I be critical towards what I see. It will become even worse with AI all over. It already started, but what is authentic and what is not, and how do I judge what is true facts and what is or fake news, so to say. All of that starts with everybody, so that is extremely important. And then you need also, of course, public authorities that can follow and track disinformation and counter disinformation. And also to do it together with other countries, because usually the messages from the adversaries, if it's Russia or China, It's targeted towards not only one country but several ones, with the overall aim of fragmenting our societies, undermining trust in democratic institutions, which will weaken our societies. And that's exactly where they want to have us, vulnerable and weak. I think it's as I said, you don't perhaps not win the direct votes on this issue, but it's a question of political leadership. So you have to have that conversation as a politician with your constituencies and the people, and explain what we are facing and why it is important and why everyone needs to step up and pitch into building our societies more resilient and vulnerable. And it might come with a cost, or it might come with a need to reprioritize in societies what you spend public spending on. But we are facing a major threat to our whole democratic way of living and our prosperity, and for that we need to invest. And these are very serious times. And I think that's a tough message, but you need to communicate it much clearer than lots of politicians do today.